afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming here today. It's great to see so many of you on this session, Your Mental Wellbeing Beyond the Pandemic. As Chloe said, my name is Mariyana Bushara, and I'm going to facilitate this session for you today. I'll take you through it. I'll tell you a little bit about myself in a minute, but let's just get some bits out of the way to begin with. So today's agenda, really what I'd like to cover today with everyone is a few key points. So the first one is just to explore how our thoughts, feelings and behavior impact our mental well-being. It's very important to have self-awareness when it comes to looking after our mental well-being. So we'll talk a little bit about self-awareness. And then I will share with you some coping strategies to help you manage some physical symptoms, unhelpful ways of thinking and unhelpful ways of behaving. So really this is today what I'm hoping to cover today. So just a few general reminders. So the session today is an hour, and as everybody's probably noticed, it has been recorded. Obviously we're using Zoom and we are either at home or in the office, but most of us are at home. So things will happen in the background and that's okay. It's not the end of the world. If the children come in, if yours are like mine and they've just broken up, or if you've got pets or whatever, it doesn't matter. And as Chloe said, also I'll use the chat quite a bit because it's such a big group. So I thought breakout rooms is probably not the best option here. So we will keep it quite interactive via the chat. And if you feel brave and you want to unmute yourself and speak out, that's absolutely fine as well. Let's keep it quite informal, and I'm happy to keep it as interactive as possible. After the session, you will get a copy of the slides. So this will be sent through to Chloe, who will distribute it to everyone who attended the session today. I will have some space at the end for Q&A, but just in case, I was delivering a session last week actually, where my internet went off. So that kind of ate the Q&A session, the timing. So just in case if we don't have time, I'm more than happy for people to email me. So I've put my email address here. So, you know, again, feel free to email me. I don't really have a problem with that at all. You will be sent a feedback questionnaire from Chloe or a colleague of hers. So it'd be great if you could just complete that. And just one thing to remember is to be kind and be curious throughout the session. When you're making any notes in the chat or whatever, just remember that to be kind to everyone else. And be curious. Let's take this session, learn together and see how we progress. So let me introduce myself formally. And some of you might know me already. I did a talk for the AUA conference back in autumn, I think. But as I said, my name is Mariyana Bushara, and I've really spent about 10 years working in the mental health field. For a number of those years, I worked directly with cognitive behavioral therapy model, so CBT, working with clients with common mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, etc. So I've done that for a few years really. And what I've noticed from the clients that I was getting is that a lot of them really struggled with work-related stress. And that organizations, it's not that they didn't want to offer help, but they didn't know how to do it. So I kind of took it upon myself, and what I really wanted to do at that point, I had that idea. I wanted to go out there to organizations and spread the word about mental well-being, and actually use some of the tools and techniques that I've learned in my career, you know, based on CBT principles, to really just go out there, spread the word, and kind of teach people some practical skills. And this is when I decided to leave. And then I thought, in order for me to understand how organizations work, I really have to kind of go into the corporate world and get to do a bit of work there. So that's when I joined HR. So I've worked in HR for a few years, and I dealt with the whole employee life cycle. Right from the day when they come through the door to the day they leave. So I've dealt with, you know, recruitment, reward, employee relations. I've done, you know, quite a bit of work in employee relations and supporting clients with managers and clients with mental health problems. So, and then I moved into organization development, which I absolutely love. You know, my role is very much about coaching, supporting people, and developing people. So, you know, my passion is to develop people, whether that's personally or professionally. And this is what I enjoy the most. So I do that, and then I also do these workshops as well. So that's really me in a nutshell, from a you know, from a personal perspective from mental health. I guess I got my first episode of depression when I was about 14. I just woke up one day and I couldn't get out of bed. I just lost all motivation. Everything was doom and gloom, and it felt horrible. And you know, when I kind of grew a bit, that's when I started to develop interest in mental health. So I'm really passionate about mental health and mental well-being in the workplace. And I feel like there's so much that people can do, you know, just kind of to learn some tools and techniques that help them manage their mental well-being. So today is all going to be about providing you with something that just you can use on a daily basis to help you manage that well-being. Whether you've got a mental health problem or not, it doesn't really matter, because actually, you know, it's really important just to look after our well-being. And yes, as you've seen with the pandemic, it fluctuates a lot. So, you know, we've got good days and bad days. So let's just bear that in mind as well. Great, so let's start with the first slide. So I thought the first thing that we could do is just introduce, just put a definition in place for mental well-being. So the World Health Organization defines mental well-being as a kind of state where we feel and express a range of emotions, feel engaged with work in general, feel relatively confident in yourself and have positive self-esteem, live and work productively, cope with stresses of everyday life, and adapt and manage in times of change and uncertainty. And that's where we all want to be. Yeah. So, you know, when we do quite a bit of work in the mental health space, this is to kind of get us to a point where we're here. You know, our mental well-being is like that. We're, you know, on a regular basis, we feel like that. Okay, so let's start. So how I've designed the session is that is some of it is quite reflective, because if you know, we've learned so much from the pandemic, from a psychological perspective as well as a work perspective, obviously. So I'm going to help people just identify some of the things that they have learned from what we've gone through over the last year or so. So I'm going to have some reflective questions at the start and then some reflective questions at the end. And with these questions, it's almost like you can create your own well-being plan. So you can kind of use that, you know, in the future. And then in the middle, we're covering some theory and some practical techniques to help you manage. So you can just make some kind of brief notes. So if you've got a pen and paper handy, it might be good to write some of these questions down and just keep it for future reference. And add to it as we go through the session. If there's something there that, you know, you kind of picked up from the session and you want to keep that, then it might be that you can add it to that wellbeing plan. Okay, so let's have a look. So with mental well-being, what's really important is the self-awareness. So really, this is the first step to help us feel better about ourselves. If we don't know what we're like when we're well, or you know, what kind of pushes our buttons, all of these things, the chances are we're not going to be able to look after our own well-being. So the first thing, the key really, is self-awareness, and this is what I'm going to take you through today. Just help you build some of that self-awareness. So let's look at the first question. So the first question says, what are you like when you're well? So when you're feeling great, what are you like? So again here, if I can ask people just to reflect on that question for a bit, write it on a piece of paper, and then put something in the chat. Share something in the chat about what are you like when you're well? Positive, absolutely. What else? Enthusiastic, absolutely. Able to focus, happy, energized, effective. Yeah, loads of patience, calm, free, confident, energized. Exactly. Can see the future, balanced. Yeah, cheerful, engaged. Clarity of thought, that's really important. Looking forward to things, curious. See the positives in life. That's again, really valid point. So, all of these things tell us that we're feeling well. Feel can do almost anything. Exactly. We feel like really energized, can deal with negative things that happen. Absolutely. We have the capacity to deal with things that can go wrong. And that's, this tells us really that, we are well. And if you go back to the definition that we talked about, a lot of these things that you've mentioned actually fit under this definition. So it's really important for you as an individual to recognize what are you like when you're well. And although there will be some similarities, that we're all unique. So there might be some things that, that are unique to you that, are quite personal. So for example, I'm quite an energetic person, I have loads of energy. When I'm well, I'm running around, I'm socializing, etc. I've got a sister who's the complete opposite. So she's really quiet. She doesn't, she doesn't like to interact that much with people, etc. When I'm not great, when I'm not feeling well, I go completely quiet. When she's not well, she gets a bit hyper and manic. So really, really important to just understand what are you like when you're well for you as an individual, and make a list of these things so that you can refer to them when things start to go a bit wrong. Okay. Next question, again, if you can just reflect, write something down on your piece of paper or your phone, and then add it in the chat. Okay. What are your triggers? So triggers are really interesting. And if you don't know your triggers, the chances are you won't be able to deal with them. So triggers are things that make you lose your balance. So they could be external things. So for example, they could be work pressure, financial difficulties, anything like that. Or they could be internal things. Internal things are the pressure that we put on ourselves. So I have to be perfect all the time. Things need to be organized in a certain way, etc. These are all our internal triggers. So what are your triggers? The things that make you lose your balance? Again, if you can just think about it, write it down and share in the box. Too many plates spinning and feeling like not enough time to do them. Yeah. Tiredness. Yeah. So one of your triggers is tiredness. Lack of sleep. Absolutely. Excessive workload, lack of control, hormones. Yeah. Tired, something that feels unfair, feeling like everything is moving too fast, overwhelmed, work pressure. Yeah. Illness in the family. Yeah. Crowds. Yeah. So that could be a trigger for some people. Yeah. Too many demands on time, work pressure, colleagues' absence, hormones and workload. Absolutely. No clear direction. Yeah. So, maybe uncertainty could be a bit of a trigger for us. Injustice. Absolutely. Yeah. Trying to do too much at home for other people, too much, feeling lack of control, unrealistic expectations. Yeah, absolutely. So these boredom, yeah, that could be a trigger. Actually, that could be something that makes you, lose your balance a bit. Ignoring my own needs, yeah. So with all of these things, like doing too much, ignoring own needs and things like that, I will give you some examples later on, or some techniques to help you manage that a little bit better. Too much change and uncertainty. Yeah. And injustice as well. Somebody mentioned that earlier on. Again, I'll look at that in a little bit more detail and maybe give you some techniques to help you overcome some of these feelings when you do get them. So identify what your triggers are. Yeah. For some of us, the trigger this summer is going to be having kids in the house while trying to work. Yeah, so this could be quite quite a significant one for some of us. So just find out what triggers you, and you can add to the list. The more you reflect on this and the more you become aware of it, the more you can add to this list, and hopefully that will enable you to look after your well-being. Okay, next question, and this is the last one. What are your early warning signs? So early warning signs are the things that the subtle changes within us is that will tell me or someone else around me that I'm starting to feel a bit on edge or starting to feel a bit stressed or whatever. So for me, for example, one of the early warning signs is that I get a bit snappy with people. And it's interesting because my husband notices that before I do. Yeah, so it might be that some people notice that before you do. So exactly, short-tempered, irritable, tired, lack of energy, brain fog, trouble sleeping, not getting things done. Yeah, absolutely. Working late into the night. Yes. Not keeping a to-do list anymore. Headaches, snapping, don't want to read or hang out, forgetfulness, irritation, tiredness, second guessing myself, self-doubt, low confidence. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, overeating. Yeah, heading for the chocolate. Absolutely. Lack of focus. I go quiet. Bad skin. Yes. Not sleeping or disengaging. All of these things are really early warning signs that can come up. Hiding, isolation, critical of others. Yes, absolutely. So what's really important is actually to know what your early warning signs are and then identify that as soon as you can. So, as soon as you start to notice some of these early warning signs, it's about putting a plan in place before our health deteriorates even further. So we manage those early warning signs as quickly as we can, put some measures in place to help us cope a little bit better, and then we feel better. Otherwise, we're going to get stuck quite a bit, and then we're only going to feel worse and worse. Okay, so again, bear these in mind, and these will differ from one person to another. One sign for me is not necessarily the same for you. So just bear that in mind. So today is very much unique to you. Yeah, and I attend a lot of these actually wellbeing webinars, and what people tend to do sometimes is just do one size and then we try to fit that size on everyone, and it doesn't really work like that. It's very unique to you. So everything that I take today, have a think about it and just think, is that going to work for me or not? If it's not going to work for you, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Brilliant. So let's have a look at some of the indicators then from that we could, potentially we or other people can display when they're not feeling good. So some of these, it's better for me to divide them into 3 categories. So I divide them into 3, and I'll tell you a little bit about why in a minute. So if feeling wise, you might start to feel anxious, stressed, feeling a bit low. You might have problem making decisions. You've mentioned all of these things already, so I'm not going to go through them. But all of these feelings could be your early warning signs. Tearful as well, that could be quite a big one for some people if they start to feel a bit tearful. And just to bear in mind that the ones in blue, if we're at work, these are the ones that you might be able to notice in other people. So if they're more irritable than usual, or if they've lost their sense of humor, you might be able to notice that online. You've then got your physical, which again, you've all noticed. You've all mentioned before, your fatigue, headache, change in sleep pattern. So again, that will differ from one person to another. Some of us will sleep a lot when we're feeling quite stressed or low. Some of us won't sleep at all. So that fluctuates quite a bit. Appetite is the same. So some of us will eat quite a bit. So comfort eating, some of us will stop eating. So again, it's very unique to you. Behaviors, you've got increased smoking, drinking. We're going to look at behaviors in more details in a bit. Withdrawal, if at work and somebody always switches their camera off and all of a sudden they start to switch it off, then, that's something to ask about. What else? Working excessive hours, you mentioned that. Restlessness, increased sickness, absence, if you're a manager and you've noticed that. And somebody who's starting to make errors that they never used to make. So they used to be very accurate at work, and all of a sudden they've started to make errors. So that could be an indicator that this person's struggling a little bit, or you as a person. And I've just got a message here to say, I get migraines, but only after the stressful period is over, not much else. Yes, exactly. So yes, that's not an early warning sign, but it's like an after effect of stress. But if you identify the early warning signs, that might help you, find a way of coping so that you don't get to that period where you're stressed, and therefore that leads to a migraine. So this is why the early warning signs are really important. Okay, let's have a look at the next slide then. Okay, so what I've done here is I've really based what we've talked about very much on the CBT principles. So, CBT, there's four main components that we talk about. So we talk about our thoughts, feelings, physical sensations, and behavior. So if you've noticed in the last slide, we talked about feelings, physical, and behavior. We don't really talk that much about the thoughts when we're working with other people, because that's quite private. That's very personal. So I will talk a little bit about thoughts today, but just for you, for your own use. So, really the basis of that is how we think, how we feel, and how we behave all interact together. So this cycle really is interlinked. So we need to look at the whole picture when we're looking at our mental well-being. We need to look at the whole picture, as all of these are interlinked and have an impact on each other. What I really like about this model is it breaks it down into these 4 areas. So we can take each area and work with each area individually. Instead of thinking, oh my goodness, I'm stressed and I don't know where to start. This separates it into these 4 elements, so we can look at each area and deal with each area separately. And this is really what I've based some of what I'm going to talk about today. So I'll kind of take you through this in more details and what you can do in each of these areas to help you maintain a good mental well-being. But just to remember that all of these areas are interlinked. And when we use this, we use it very much in the here and now. So it's not about looking at past problems, but it's about looking at what is bothering me right now, what has triggered me, and now what can I do with it? So let's put this into practice a little bit, because if you're not familiar with it, it might be a little bit difficult to understand. So let's put it into practice. Meet Jason. So Jason has a trigger. And his trigger is Monday mornings. Doesn't like Monday mornings, especially in the autumn. So as soon as he gets up in the morning, he thinks, so in his thoughts here, he thinks, I can't cope. This is too much. This week is going to be long. I can't be bothered to do anything. So as soon as he wakes up on a Monday morning, he has these thoughts. Feelings. So having all of these thoughts make him feel quite low, unmotivated, stressed, tearful, guilty. He has lack of interest, possibly a bit of angry and irritable. Having all of these feelings feed nicely into the physical symptoms. So now he's feeling quite tired. He's already woken up with a headache because of all of this. He's feeling quite tensed, restless. He has sleep problems, appetite problems, etc. So in order to make himself feel better, what Jason then does, which is the behavior, he gets out of bed, he manages to get out of bed, has a sugary breakfast, logs in on his work laptop, but does very little. It doesn't move much throughout the day, then drinks alcohol in the evening. So what he's doing, his behavior is very much reinforcing that negative thoughts that he has about himself. So yes, absolutely. If you're behaving like that, yeah, it does demonstrate that you can't cope. Yeah, it is too much for you, obviously. And this week is going to be long if it's going to feel like that. And yes, you can't be bothered with anything, yeah, which is going to feed nicely into the feelings and then nicely into the physical symptoms. And again, he's behaving in that way. And this person, Jason, stuck quite a bit in this vicious cycle. Can anyone relate to this cycle at all? So again, just use the chat. Yes, yes, in lockdown, absolutely. Yeah, and we've all had it to some extent. We've all been trapped in this cycle, and a lot of people struggled in the January lockdown. Yeah, so but the way that we're behaving in this situation very much feeds into that cycle. I had one person put their hand up. Happy for you to unmute and ask a question or make a comment, not a problem.
Sorry, it's when you asked the question, I just put my hand up to say yes, me too.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Yes, so absolutely. We can all relate to this and it happened to all of us. So how do we break this vicious cycle? Let's talk a little bit about that. So another question to just ask yourself is what maintains your vicious cycle? So this, you can use that with anything. So although here I've used it with an example where somebody's felt quite low, you could use it with stress, you can use it with anxiety, you can use it with anger, you can even use it with sleep. So I do, different workshops that address these different topics, and we do this model with each of these topics. So just have a think for you, what hits you the most. So identify what your trigger is, your thoughts, feeling, physical behavior in that situation. So, but I'll take you through it so that hopefully by the end of it, you'll be able to identify some of these. So let's try to break this vicious cycle somehow. But the chances are, if somebody's feeling really stressed or really low, and I say to them, try to think a little bit more positively, or, just think a bit, just try to see things from a different perspective. The chances are they're going to say to me, you go and try it yourself and see if it works. Because it's probably not going to work. If you're under a lot of pressure and you're under a lot of stress, you can't think rationally. So what tends to happen is actually when we look at this cycle and we try to break this vicious cycle, we look at the behavior first, because it's easier to say to somebody, change the way you do things a little bit, rather than to say to them, change the way you think about something. This will come, but we need to be in a place where the mood has gone up a little bit to enable that person to challenge their own thoughts or rationalize some of those thoughts. So the behavior is the one that we start with the most. So let's focus on that a little bit. So today I'll take you through all, the four of these, the three mainly. The feelings we don't really talk about that much, because once you've worked with the behavior, your thoughts and some of the physical sensations, the chances are you will feel better. So today we'll focus on behavior, thoughts and physical. So let's start with the behavior, because that's the most, most effective in most of the situations. So just again, for you, from your personal perspective, identify, and again, use the chat box, identify what is a helpful behavior and what is an unhelpful behavior for you. So helpful behaviors are behaviors that make us feel better. Unhelpful behaviors are behaviors that make us feel worse. So let's start with the helpful behaviors. What are the helpful behaviors that make us feel better? Again, exercise, going for a walk, yeah. Taking a break, enough sleep, yeah. Making a list, speaking with friends, yeah. Yeah, to-do list, exercise, fresh air, healthy eating, meditating, spending time outdoors. Yes, absolutely. So yoga, yeah. Lists and exercise, yeah. Taking time to think, absolutely. Doing something, anything, yeah. Turn computer off, taking something off the list, absolutely. So these are all our helpful behaviors. being in nature, talking about feelings. It's interesting because when I used to do these talks before the pandemic, people used to come up with completely different lists. So some people used to say, for example, swimming, going to the theatre, having a massage, etc. But it's almost like now, because we had to go through a time where actually we can't do a lot of these things, we've adapted. We started to find things that we can actually do on a regular basis. Spending time with parents, absolutely. So all of these are helpful behaviours, and we know that. We know that very well, but somehow when we're not feeling great, we let go of some of these helpful behaviors. Let's kind of just remember that as we're going through today. Somebody said, watch an episode of Friends. Absolutely. Yeah, that works for you. Great. So yes, do that. And okay, what about the unhelpful behaviors? So unhelpful behaviors are things that make us feel worse. So bearing in mind that in the short term, they might make us feel better, but in the long term, worse. Brilliant. Alcohol. That's the key. So short term, it makes us feel good. In the long term, it's not. Eating too much, social media, not leaving the house, staying in bed, carry on working, eating sweets, working longer hours, scrolling, yeah, exactly, complaining, yeah, so our phones is quite significant here, negative self-talk, yeah, yes, moaning to a friend, making everything a drama, absolutely, staying up late, yeah, working through lunch break. So initially that sounds like a great idea, but on the long term, if you keep doing that on the long term, the chances are it's not a very good idea. So for you, again, as an individual, identify what are your unhelpful behaviors, yeah, and start to make a note of them. Because again, the more you get to know about yourself, the better, yeah. So, and with things like skipping a lunch break and things like that, we're quite versatile as humans. So actually doing that once or twice, it doesn't matter. It's not the end of the world, because we've got peaks and troughs at work, and that's okay. Working longer hours, if you're doing that for a little bit, it doesn't matter. But as long as that it doesn't become a habit, yeah, and if it starts to make you feel stressed, that's when it becomes an issue. Other comments are coming through. Putting myself last, absolutely. Trying to be a superhero doesn't work. Yeah, so really just important to remember your helpful and unhelpful behaviors. So as soon as you start identifying the early warning signs, have a sit down and just think, what's going on here? What am I doing that's feeding into this? And what can I do now to break that cycle straight away? Yeah. I'm going to go to the next slide, but actually you've met, oh, yeah, that's fine. So the next slide actually helps you quite a bit with this. So it's the stress bucket analogy. And for all of these people who said, it's not superhero, can't do everything, etc. And for actually some of the people who say that I don't have any time to do relaxation exercises or anything of that sort, enjoyable activities, this really demonstrates, the stress bucket really demonstrates why it's important to do it. So let me explain the analogy to you. So if you imagine your life as a bucket, so you've got this bucket, and at the top here, you've got 3 taps. And at the bottom, you've got 3 taps. So your taps at the top are all your daily worries. So this is finances, probably, work, family, maybe issues with friends, health, anything like that. So up here is all your, everything that life throws at you, basically. Your taps at the bottom is how you release some of this tension and stress. Okay. So what tends to happen a lot of the time is your taps at the top are working really well, and they will never stop working because that's life. But you start to get a blockage in the taps in the bottom here. So you stop doing the things that you like, you stop you stop doing your enjoyable activities, you don't look after yourself, what will happen to this bucket over time if we've got a blockage, do you think? Again, just in the chat. It will overflow. Yeah, absolutely. It will fill up and then it will overflow. And this is when it comes out as stress, depression, anxiety, anger, whatever it is. And you know, when you hear people who say it was that last thing that tipped me over the edge, that's your stress bucket. Yeah, so it was already full and it only took that one thing to tip you over the edge. So really, really important from time to time, just if you remember your stress bucket, what's going on with my stress bucket, and start using those tabs at the bottom. When you start to identify the early warning signs, just think about what's going on. Why am I not using these tabs at the bottom? What's happening? Identify what your tabs at the bottom are, and these are the helpful behaviors that we talked about. And then, start using some of these to balance that bucket a little bit. And remember, it took a while to fill that bucket, so it will take a while to empty as well. I used to work with some clients who always used to say to me, well, I've done it, I've gone out for a walk, or I've played a round of golf, it didn't make me feel better. It's not going to make you feel better straight away, because it will take time to empty that bucket, so keep going. Really interesting comment there from Christina. At the moment, I'm feeling guilty for doing the things that relieve the stress. Okay, have a think in the long term. If you don't do these things, how are you going to feel? Better or worse? The chances are you're going to feel worse. So, it's about being kind to yourself. And actually, there's nothing wrong with spending some time doing the things that you really enjoy, because you're looking after your stress bucket. And the chances are, when we look after ourselves, we can look after other people. If we don't do that, we might do the things that we need to do, but we'll do it in a way that's not very productive. We might be snappy towards people, we might be short-tempered, etc. So just really important to put things into perspective a little bit. I am a better me when I'm relaxed. Yeah, when I'm doing things for myself. Okay, so next one, really quickly. So look after your stress bucket. So your behavior is really important. What fuels you to feel better and what makes you feel worse. Remember your helpful and unhelpful behaviors, identify them, make a note of them, and start looking after your stress bucket a little bit more. So we've looked at the behavior, we've talked a little bit about the things that we can do to make us feel better. So we're feeling a little bit better, which is fantastic. Now let's have a look at the physical side of things a little bit. And you're all familiar with, what can make us feel better physically. So just really quickly take you through that. So from a physical perspective, I really like this quote, the time to relax is when you don't have any time. You get to a point where you think, I'm really struggling to find time to relax. This is your sign, you kind of just need to relax. Well, if you're one of these people who really struggle to prioritize relaxation exercises, and when I talk about relaxation exercises, this could mean different things to different people. So again, what you've highlighted earlier on, that could be a relaxation exercises. It takes many forms. So it doesn't have to be sitting there listening to relaxing music or sitting on a sunbed in a holiday. It could be anything, whatever really works for you. So, if you really struggle to find time, schedule it in. Just put something in your diary. It doesn't have to be every day, maybe every 2 days or something. And it's the little things. It could be just going out for a walk to clear your head or anything like that. So just to bear that in mind. The other thing that really helps and works quite a bit for some people is mindfulness. And I'm sure you've all heard of mindfulness before. So, but really the principles of it is very simple. So, so with mindfulness, what it says is that we spend a lot of time worrying about the future, a lot of time thinking about the past or dwelling on the past, that should have happened or whatever, and very little time enjoying the here and now. So what mindfulness does, it just brings you back from the future, brings you back from the, from the past, and just anchors you in the here and now. Just for a minute, here and now, just focus on what's happening. So one of, this exercise, which you probably heard of before, but it's a really good reminder, is just to be mindful and just think of 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And you can do that anywhere. If you have a break in the garden, for example, and the weather's like this today, you could just have a think. You can just sit outside and just be mindful. Use this technique to be mindful a little bit. Or at work, during a lunch break, if you've got a really busy day and you can't take the time off, you can't go for a walk or whatever, just use this technique. It's really simple. You can just sit down or stand up and use this technique for 5 minutes or so. It really just helps bring you back. And with our mental health, it's very much about dwelling. We can do a bit of dwelling, and some of you mentioned those negative thoughts, and kind of focusing on the things that are not going right. So mindfulness just helps, or this technique helps bring you back here as much as possible. Okay, so next one, let's have a look at the thoughts. So we talked about behaviors, giving you some ideas there on how you can look after it. We talked about the physical, so some really simple techniques there to help you kind of stay physically well. Feelings, as I said, we're not going to talk about. Let's have a look at your thoughts. So thoughts are really important. So we'll spend just a couple of minutes or a few minutes here talking about your thoughts. So my next slide, just to warn everyone, I've got a picture of a clown. So if people get really, kind of anxious or nervous about clowns, you can switch your screen off now, and I'll just be a few minutes and then you can come back. But I just kind of want to demonstrate something to you. So thoughts are the things that come into our head. They're not reality most of the time, but they're just things that come into your head, and they can happen anytime, anywhere. When you wake up in the morning, it's amazing how many thoughts go through your mind. Just notice it tomorrow when you wake up in the morning, just as soon as you open your eyes, or just before, notice how many thoughts go through your mind. And notice the impact that has on you as well, on the way that you feel. But let me just take you through this next slide. So what I want you to do, and just to remember that actually thoughts are not facts. So, how we perceive and think about a situation determines how we feel. Different thoughts can lead to different feelings. So if Jason's waking up and saying, I can't be bothered, this is going to be too much, etc., it can lead to feelings of being feeling quite depressed or low or unmotivated. If he's waking up in the morning and just thinking, actually, it's not a bad day, I'm going to give it my best, the chances are his feelings are going to be quite different. And just to remember that, your thoughts can change even if the situation is exactly the same. And actually in my next talk, I'll talk a little bit about that, about, we can have different feelings and thoughts despite the situation being exactly the same. And just to remember that when we feel stressed, anxious, or depressed, our thoughts are distorted. So they become a little bit irrational. So what we try to do is just make them a little bit more rational. So we're not talking about changing negative thoughts to positive thoughts. We're talking about changing negative thoughts to rational thoughts. Because that's, life is not always positive. We will go through bad things in life, and it's okay to be kind to yourself and just be a little bit rational. And rather than saying, oh, everything is going to be great, it's about saying things are going to be okay and I'll cope. Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look then at the next one. So if we see this picture of a clown and you've got some comments next to it, what I want you to do is to just identify. So I'm going to go through each one and just tell me if it's a fact or an opinion. So that will help you very much identify some of the facts. or the opinions, which are, thoughts really that are personal to us, and a lot of the time they're not true. So let's look at the first one. Funny. Tell me, what do you think? Fact or opinion? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an opinion. Yeah, some people find them funny, some people find them quite scary. Colourful hair. What do you think? Yes, absolutely. Fact. Fact is something that, nobody can dispute one. Nobody can sit here and say, no, they don't have colourful hair. It's a fact. And a lot of the time, your thoughts are not going to be facts. So just to remember that. Painted face. Absolutely. Yeah, fact. Weird. Yes, it's absolutely an opinion. Some people find them weird, some people don't. Performer. Yes, it's a fact, actually. It's a fact. They perform, some people like them, some people don't. And that's okay. Scary. Yeah, absolutely. It's an opinion. So could you see the difference between facts and opinions? So the facts are the ones that, are there, and everyone can see them, everyone can agree with them. Opinion is something that, changes from one person to another. So for me, I actually used to love clowns. I have no problem with clowns, growing up or whatever. I used to love them until I watched The Joker in cinema, and that was it for me. After that, I thought, no, really dislike them. So, it's changed my opinion over the years. My perception or opinion on them has changed. But the fact is, they're still an entertainer. They've still got coloured hair, etc. So let's have a look at the next slide. So we've identified what are the facts and what are the opinions. Now, one of the things that you can do is, once you've identified these thoughts, is just to have a think about, if you've identified something that's quite negative, is to just use this really simple technique. It's called using the how instead of the why questioning. So, for example, instead of saying, why is this pandemic taking so long? Why are we here today? It's about saying, so how could I move forward? How do I, make use of that, or how do I cope in the current situation? Instead of saying, for example, why did I lose my job? It's about saying, so how do I need to prepare myself to get another job? Instead of saying, why is my manager being horrible to me? It's about saying, how do I improve my relationship with my manager? So the how is very much practical thinking versus the why, which is overthinking. So you can get stuck in the why quite a bit. Why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? And some of the comments that you made earlier on, that guilt feeling or any of that, using the why could be quite, it kind of makes you look inward, and you blame yourself and you blame other people. When you use the why, this is what happens. When you use the how, for example, though, it takes you to a problem-solving approach. Yeah. And over time you will feel more resilient. It's very proactive. When we talked earlier a little bit, some of the comments said, it's moaning, we moan to people quite a bit, or being around, toxic people. It's just the mentality sometimes. So instead of focusing on the why did that happen, because things will happen, believe it or not, and bad things will happen, it's about saying, how do I move on now? How do I cope with this? What would help me cope with this? What do I need to do? So just remember that when things are bad, instead of shifting to the why, shift to the how. Yeah. How do I move forward with this? Yes, absolutely. Presenting a solution rather than a problem. Absolutely. So what we've done here really is we've had a look at the cycle, and we've broken that cycle now, because actually, if we look back at Jason, his behavior has changed a little bit. So now he's doing a little bit more exercise, he's talking to friends, he's getting a bit of fresh air, he's eating healthy. So already he's feeling a little bit better. Yeah. Physically, he's relaxing a little bit more. He's using some mindfulness, for example, that's making him feel a little bit better. And then we've managed some of these thoughts. So instead of these thoughts where he was dwelling a little bit, why is this happening? You know, I can't cope, etc. It's about saying, yes, this is happening. How can I cope with it? So can you see how the difference this is? Instead of saying, you know, from going, I can't cope to, yes, I can cope, absolutely fine. It's going to be brilliant. It's about saying, I will be able to cope. And this is what I need to do to cope, for example. So it could be like having a bit of a strategy in place. So we've broken this vicious cycle. So we're no longer there. And we've created something that's a little bit more positive and rational. So that really takes us to the next two reflective questions. So I've got just two questions for you, and then we'll kind of end with some Q&A if we've got time. And this question talks a little bit about what are the things that you do on a regular basis to help you stay well. So again, you don't have to, you know, it doesn't have to be something major, but just having a think about these things will connect all the dots together. So the things that you do on a regular basis to help you stay well. So for me, it would be like getting enough sleep, eating well, all of these basic things. But once you know what these things are, you'll be able to identify these early warning signs. And then you'll be able to bring some of these things in straight away to help you feel a little bit better. Make things and help others, absolutely. Quality time with the family, yoga, guitar, talking to friends, dancing, sleepwalking, reading, yeah. And again, it's different from one person to another, and that's absolutely fine. That's what's really good about this. It's very unique to you. Monitoring my stress, yeah, on the fitness watch, absolutely. Gardening, listening to music, swimming, gardening projects, any of these things. So keep doing these things during difficult times. Even in the winter when it hits us really bad. For some of us, really struggle in the winter. So it's about identifying, have like a contingency plan. When the winter comes, these are the things that I'm going to use. It's like almost your wellbeing box. Take it out on a really bad day. Yeah, take it easy on yourself. Absolutely. Be kind to yourself. That's really important. And again, when things are not going great, we tend to be very self-critical on ourselves and other people, actually. Yeah. Okay, last question. What coping techniques can you use to help you regain balance? So let's say you're in a situation where you have been triggered. So the trigger's there, really heavy workload at work or something happened, health in the family or whatever. What coping techniques can you use to help you regain your balance? And a lot of it will be some of the things that we've already talked about. Step back, try to look at the bigger picture. Absolutely. It's not focusing on what we're doing right now. Sleep helps me process my thoughts. Yeah, start processing these thoughts. Talk to someone about it. Meditate, breathing, make a to-do list. Meditation, absolutely. Deep breathing plans. So here we really acknowledge that things will happen, but let's try to address it early on so we don't really fall apart, basically. Because we're all humans, we're full of emotions, so we will have ups and downs, and that's okay. But there's a difference between a down here and a down there, and we want to be, a down here. Down here is okay. We just need to look after ourselves so we don't slip into that, which has happened quite a lot during the pandemic. Asking how, step back and think of the situation. Yeah, photography, yeah, absolutely. So really important things, just have a think about what your coping techniques are. And this is it really. This is all I wanted to cover today. So really grateful for you having me today and kind of listening and being quite interactive throughout the session. But just before we go, I think we've got about 4 minutes. Does anyone have any burning questions that they would like to ask about what we've covered today? You're welcome, Darren. Thank you. I've got a question here. What's the best way to focus someone else on solutions, not a problem? They've got to acknowledge that focusing on the problem is not making them move forward. That's got to come from them. So they've got to sit, reflect, and find out that actually dwelling on the solution is really, dwelling on the problem is really making them feel worse than better. So it's really just exploring with them, how is that moving you forward? How is that making you feel better or worse? And get them to kind of reflect on that. So what do you suggest if you're trying to break an unhealthy habit, but just not getting anywhere? Start small. I think that's the key. Just find out what the benefits are. Why are you doing it in the first place? What's your motivation? And do you really believe in that or not? Do you believe in the reason why you're doing it? Because if you don't, the chances are you're not going to succeed. And if you do, it's about taking really small steps. Be kind to yourself, reward yourself when you've succeeded, because that's really important. And celebrate success. Yeah. There's so much coming in. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Jan just mentioned something about where does the block lie? Yeah. Okay. How do you stop procrastinating about your mental health? Again, find out, reflect a little bit and say, if my mental health is good, what am I like? Do you want to be that person? And when my mental health is not good, what are you like? And do you want to be that person? What is the motivation? Yeah, so really it's about understanding what the importance of having good mental health. Okay, I think we're running out of time a little bit. There's loads coming in and I don't think we've got the time for some of this. So again, as I said, you've got my email address. If anyone wants to drop me feedback or want to connect on LinkedIn or ask me any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them.